Hello, welcome to Revelator Alpha. Hope you're all well. So, this is a live show, another live show coming out at you. Changed the timing a little bit. I thought I'd, come in for about half an hour or so and, talk about bikes and talk about what's going on, a little bit of industry news. But really, just going to be talking about the future of biking because I was having an interesting conversation with a bloke the other day. And he was basically saying, well, probably going to get rid of the bike. And I said, oh, yeah, what was it? He said, well, I just don't ride it. I just don't, get the same enjoyment out of it and all that kind of stuff. Look, and each to his own or her own, right? And I've met many people over the years who've just walked away from biking. They just, maybe they've come back to it afterwards. I don't know. But they just walked away from it. I know many people at a young age, they get into bikes. And then as soon as they get their car license, they drop the bike and they don't continue, with a bike. They just continue with a car. So it's not as if it's an unheard of phenomena where, people who ride bikes, men or women, ride bikes, and then all of a sudden they think no. And I've got to say a lot of it is to do with a younger age. And then as you're growing up and having families, and I've spoken to lots of people who've been spooked by still riding bikes and fearful that something might happen to them, and then they got young children, something, and so on and so forth. So it does happen. So I just wonder how many more just test the chat. I was just wondering how many more people out there are thinking about, leaving riding or not even getting into riding in the first place. I talked about this quite a lot over the last few years in terms of next generation rider, who's coming into the scene, who's going to be riding bikes in the next few years. What about the motorcycle industry? How does that react in? I've got to say, for the most part, I think that the motorcycle industry has really, really reacted in the last year by reversing the trend, a lot of it, in many cases, that a lot of the manufacturers are saying we've got to get people back into riding motorcycles, or at least keep the ones who are currently riding, get them to keep on riding, keep on buying. And the only way we're going to do that is given great value and cheaper motorcycling. Let's not forget that motorcycling in its origination was supposed to be a cheap form of transport. The evolution of mobility is that you walk, and then you've got a bicycle, then you've got a motorcycle, then you've got a car, and then, so on and so forth. So that's the way it's always kind of been. Whereas somewhere along the line, people have got into bikes, then they weren't workhorses anymore, they weren't tools anymore, then they were leisure things to have, and then people were just in and out of fashions, aren't they, in terms of leisure items. And then people also, the price of biking got really, really expensive for a lot of people, and then you kind of wonder, do I really want to do it anymore? Now, of course, this is outside of your riding environment, right? If what the weather's like. For a lot of people, I know a lot of people around the world, 6 months of the year they can't ride. Pretty much 5 months of the year they can't ride because the weather is so poor, or 4 months of the year. So they put their bikes away for the winter in October, November time. That's it. They won't see them until March or whatever it is. So you got 6 months you're not riding. You're on snowmobiles or whatever you're on, right? So, but, people coming in and out of biking all the time. I make reference to the fact that, and if you're watching this and you want to put a note in the chat, let us know what your thoughts are. Or if you're watching this later, let us know and put a comment down as well. But let us know your thoughts. But I talked about this in terms of Harley Davidson recently. They were actually the things that I've always criticised them for in terms of making expensive bikes, which is still the case, right? And not making cheaper entry-level bikes or bikes that people can afford in terms of mass numbers, right? And we could talk of things. We could talk about the things like the Sportster and stuff, whilst they got the Nightster at £10,000, dollars, shekels, they're still overpriced when you compare that to other relevant bikes, better bikes on the market, right? So there's that whole discussion to be had, and I know it's there, in the shadows, as it were. But what they have done is say, well, actually, we know that bikers are getting out and they want to leave motorcycling because they're getting older. But we're going to double down on that to try and stop them from leaving biking, two-wheeled mobility. We're going to get them into three-wheeled mobility. So from a marketing point of view, I think that's quite a good idea. The problem is you're also banking on those same aging out bikers to have lots of money available, right? Now remember, when we're talking about motorcycle, or actually any automotive brand in terms of their success, we're not talking about can they convince you to buy a used bike? Can they convince you to go and love the brand, Harley Davidson, Ford, Ducati or whatever? We're talking about, can they convince you to buy new motorcycles or new cars, new trucks, whatever it is? That's the only way they survive. It's new products. They've got to push new products. Now, there's always going to be a revolving door, but they've got to make sure that they don't outprice a lot of people. We've seen this in the United States, not only with bikes, but with trucks and all sorts of things, right? Cost of living goes up. Prices go up and up and up. Tariffs may cause issues in certain sectors as well. And then all of a sudden people just can't afford it. So they either just don't buy, or they get themselves into big financial problems. Or they prioritize and say, okay, I will buy the truck because I need that for work. But the bike I don't need anymore, because guess what? It's only for enjoyment, and my priorities are elsewhere. I've got exactly the same issues. I've always had the same issues, and I'm sure you do too, in terms of priority, in terms of finances, and it changes from year to year. And if you've ever had children, this is not to say that only people with children have financial issues or financial wranglings to deal with. However, there are different things that happen to everybody in terms of family commitments, in terms of priorities. So you kind of think, well, okay, what do I do here in terms of priorities? I had a comment on a video I picked up on my account. He said, whatever happened to that diesel bike build that I was doing? Well, this was a few years ago now, many years ago now. I got about halfway through it, and I had the frame and I had the engine, and I'd married it up to a gearbox, and it was all working. So the next step was to weld it into the frame or make brackets to put into the frame. But I ran out of money. The simple truth was I ran out of money. And then I had a very young family, and there was certain expenses that were coming up, and I just couldn't. I couldn't justify prioritizing this diesel bike, wet dream of a build that for me, over the money that I need to spend on my family, right, to support my family. So that was the one thing. So it was a hard decision, but it was a very easy decision in many ways. I said, I need to sell it. So I need to sell. I just broke it up into its component parts, sold the frame, sold all the bikes, the bike elements of it, sold the engine off, and then I think the gearbox I sold off, and everything else just went to scrap. So it was disappointing that I never saw it through, but that's just the way it is. I've got this bike build here, this Z650, 750 one, which I finished really. I mean, I just need to tinker with it again to get it running. I haven't started it in a while. But it's a similar kind of thing. When I'm looking at it, I want to ride it around, have a bit of fun. But at the same time, I kind of think, well, do you know what? Let somebody else have the fun out of it. Let somebody else, tinker with it and play with it now. I've built it. I've done what I wanted to do with it. And then I could use that money for something else, right? And maybe pay for something else, or, take my other half and, out for a weekend or something, do something nice around the house, or do something, so there are always priorities. So I can see that why people go out of biking, or they sell their bikes because they got financial issues that they need to deal with. I can see it why people move away from biking, because the scene changes, and I've got to say, I think this depends where you are, right? It really depends where you are, and let us know in the chat, let us know in the comments later on if you agree with this. But it depends on your social circles. It depends on the people that you're with. It depends on the actual riding environment that you might be in. If there's lots of biking activity in your area, lots of biking hangouts, or if there isn't, or if they're sort of aiming places, biking meeting places, hangouts, that kind of thing, or whatever. Classic case. There was a Harley Davidson garage just down the road. Whatever your opinions of, Harley Davidson dealerships as a meeting place, there was a meeting place. That's it. Or you could just go out there and hang out. Whether you're into Harley Davidson or not, you just go and hang out in their cafe. Once a month on a Thursday, whatever it was, they had a outdoor barbecue, cookout, meeting. So people just came. I've always said this about bikers. Bikers just want to go somewhere. Yes, it's the journey. We get all that. But ultimately, you want to go somewhere and be around other bikers and being around that sort of community, right? Well, if that community's got nowhere to go on a regular basis, or there isn't the variety, then it kind of dies, or it gets too samey. If it gets too samey for a lot of people, they kind of think, I just can't, I'm going to ride to the same cafe every week, and it's just like, I want to go somewhere different. I want to go and see something different, right? So this can happen to any area, or this can happen to a whole group of friends. Some, everybody starts going in different directions, or the scene starts to die down a bit. If you're anything like where we're here in the UK, or anywhere where you got seasons, again, that changes a lot. It depends, like the summer, spring, but certainly into the summer months, it ramps up again, lots of biking activity, and then it falls away again, because of the weather, right? You can't just do anything outside. So, there's lots of reasons why the scene has an effect in terms of giving bikers enthusiasm to keep on riding out and being within the community, or whether it pulls them away. So financial situations, the actual the scene itself, and obviously individual people, they just think whether they're interested in riding anymore. I'm a great believer, this is generationally, right, but I'm a great believer that within every generation of biker that comes through, there's always going to be a certain amount of bikers. How can I put this in so that I don't sound like a complete tool? That as soon as they're riding for the first time, or they're not in it for the long haul, then they're not lifelong bikers. Because being a biker is not so much just about riding bikes, right? The actual mechanics of riding. It's also in there. It's also in there. It's what you feel. It's that passion that you got for it. And I've always having conversations with my other half, my good lady, and she goes, "What you got on your bike for?" And I just say, "Well, why not? What? Yeah, it's something I do. It's something I want to do. It's something that makes me feel good." But other people won't have that. So if you've got it, that you want to hold on to it, and you're going to want to try and hold on to it for as long as you possibly can. There are going to be other people who just say, "Hey, do you know what? I'm not really into that, right? I'm not really, I like what it is." They go with the trends. I know lots of people who've come along for the ride. We've seen this in the Harley Davidson world over many, many years, right? And the Americans call it, they call them, what do they call them? The doctors, the dentists that came along and thought, the Harley Davidson world riding bikes was a cool thing to do. The Rubs, I think they called them, the rich urban bikers or something. I don't know, whatever label you want to call them. But the whole point is that they're not really into it for the long run. I got a couple of people in the chat. Hello. Let me get my chat up here. There we go. There we go. Hey, hello. Hey, I'd like to see the 2027 Harley Davidson Road Glide CVO Limited. 2027. We have to wait another year for that, won't you? Met them both lakes. Hello, Cole. Old time, eh? Yeah, come on, you irons. Absolutely. We need all the help we can get, mate. So look, there's lots of reasons why people stay in biking, leave biking, and with that rotation, that's always been there. But I just wonder in the recent years whether more and more people are aging out and they're leaving for whatever reason. They're doing this sort of stuff. But also, I'll tell you what it is, and we've all identified this, that the new generation coming through are probably not doing it in the same numbers. And a lot of that is to do with the cost of getting a motorbike in the first place. However, I'll go back to my first point, in that I think there's a lot of decent motorcycle manufacturers out there, and namely they're Chinese and from India as well. I've got to say that, right? But they are producing relatively cheap, expensive bikes. They're cheap and inexpensive bikes. But again, it's especially here in the UK, it's the cost of getting your license in the first place, which is really prohibitive. I'm not talking about getting a learner license and to get ride around on a 50cc or a 125, depending on your age. It's actually going that next step further. So there's lots of things that stop younger people getting into motorcycling in the first place. But then we've got to look at the introduction of electric bicycles, electric scooters, that kind of thing. Those have really shown the younger people, look, we don't even need a license. We don't need anything like that. We just get on one of these little electric things and we can zip around all over the place. And they're zipping around on roads, on paths, doing whatever they want. So it kind of makes sense when you look at it. You see, they've got other forms of mobility now, young kids, that are going to be cheap to buy or relatively cheap to buy. Don't need a license for it, or maybe you should, but they just don't. And, motorcycling is taken a backward step. Hello, here we go. Right. Yeah, it's a 2006. Yes, but it didn't have the 2006 Harley Davidson Road Glide Limited. I was a bit sad. Oh, yeah? Oh, okay. Yeah. Here we go. What's this one? What's your thoughts on the future economy where people will only be able to afford bikes, almost like going back to the 1960s where folk could not afford a car? And this is the purpose of this show, really, is to say, well, at some point, I've been saying this for years, and I think people have thought I was always being a bit negative about this, but I was saying, at some point there's going to be a critical mass. There's going to be a market that's saturated with bikes that are just too expensive and that people can't afford them. So they're going to have to do something else. So I think for the most part, the motorcycle industry has responded in terms of there are lots of cheap bikes around. But the problem is, it really depends, you as an individual, and me, of course, but you as an individual, what bike do you actually want? So let's just say, for example, you want a big BMW, you want a big Harley Davidson, you want a big Indian motorcycle, right? I made a live show about that yesterday. Well, all of a sudden, then, you're not getting those for cheap. You're not buying those for cheap at all. So then you as the individual, you've got to prioritize and say, can I afford this bike as a leisure activity? Or it could be your primary mode of transport, right? Okay, whatever it is. But can I afford this over something else? Can I afford to pay 30,000, 40,000, whatever it is, 25,000 pounds, dollars, shekels on this bike? Or do I need to go and spend 20, 30,000 on that truck, on that car that can carry 4 people, that can carry all this stuff? No matter what I feel about being a biker, I've got to prioritize that. I think you're right. There's going to be a point here where people are wondering, is it really worth it? And this also comes down to government legislation. Actually, this comes down to the people who want to promote motorcycling, and for governments and state authorities to recognize the value of low impact mobility. And I say, when I talk about low impact mobility, I'm not talking about environmental impact. I'm also talking about congestion impact as well. Low impact mobility is obviously walking and cycling, right? All those are the lowest forms. But in terms of motorcycling, well, yeah, you've got a massive benefit of congestion, especially in built-up areas in cities, especially. The UK, London, have just kind of tried to readdress they're having discussions about how they value motorcycling in and around London in terms of the benefit. And this is what we've been saying in the motorcycle world for many years, that you can't dismiss petrol engine motorcycles just because they're a petrol engine. You've got to look at the overall net benefit of motorcycling, and you've got to promote them as a mode of transport, right? So it's got to have that backing from state players, from national players. It's got to have that state backing. If it doesn't, then you're always going to be fighting that system. You're always going to be fighting the man, as it were. So then it's up to the industry as itself and for individuals. But if the individuals that would be buying bikes or riding bikes, generationally, if they're being said, hey, listen, we're going to go and do something else, we're going to ride a bike, or actually, a lot of kids are not even going outside anymore. They're staying indoors. They're on their iPads. They're doing whatever they want to do, but they're not riding bikes. Now, there's always the comeback at this when actually young kids are riding bikes. They are. But the question is, are they bikers for life, as it were? Are they the ones that are going to go from a 50cc or 125, and then they will get a car, let's say, as well, but they always have bikes throughout their history, throughout their life, and then they're always going to, or they'll sell, they'll sell a bike for a couple of years, but they'll come back to it. That's, I still call that as a lifer, right? Are you going to have those? I'm not so sure. I think that generation is gone. I think that generation of somebody who will want to ride bikes for the rest of their life is gone. I think we're the pretty much the last generations, probably down to about 40-year-olds now. They're the last generations. Anybody younger than 40, you've probably had too many other influences in your life and too many other options that kind of make you feel, well, do I really want to get into biking? I could be wrong. I mean, this is just a theory. This is just a point of discussion. But it has been noticeable over the last few years in terms of motorcycle shows, in terms of product, in terms of the numbers of motorcycles that are sold, that, certain areas around the world, Europe, UK, United States, motorcycle sales, certainly the more expensive motorcycles, have really dropped. The ones that are holding up the statistics are the cheap and inexpensive bikes. So I'm a great promoter of those cheap and inexpensive bikes. And people sometimes will people will say that I'm promoting the wrong kind of motorcycling, right? I'm promoting the wrong kind of riding. And what I always feel, that if I just promoted Harley Davidson, so not promoted, I hate that word because nobody pays me to promote another product. I'll just talk about something if I want to talk about it. Harley Davidson, I'll talk about it because I ride a Harley Davidson, right? But I will talk about any other brand just as much. And I'll show that I'm working on another brand or trying to fix another brand, whatever. It doesn't have to be a Harley Davidson. It's just that I own a Harley Davidson, so a lot of the content I've made the last few years is based on that brand. But people say, well, what? You're not going to make you're not going to make videos about Harley Davidsons anymore. And I say, well, it's not about promoting them. It's about something to talk about. It's something to have a discussion about. So I don't promote them because I don't see that they're doing anything for the future of riding. That's my point. There's so many people out there who love Harley Davidson, and I'm one of them. But I also love BMW, I love Hondas, I love Indians, I love Triumphs, I love all sorts of bikes, right? I love all sorts of brands. I've said this lots and lots of times that, it's not necessarily the brand that I like, it's the bikes that I like, right? And I'll get on any bike. I love any bike. Give me a 50cc, love it. Give me a 125, 250, love it. Doesn't matter. I love it. I just acknowledge that certain bikes are better for certain kinds of journeys, right? And then all it is down to preference in terms of styling, usability, rideability. But people say, well, why aren't you promoting? Why are you being dismissive of Harley Davidson? Why are you being dismissive of these big, expensive bikes? They're all about the bike and they're all about the future. And I say, well, they might be for some people who can afford it, but you're only looking at this from your own lens. You're not looking at it from an objective point of view. You're not looking at it from the outsider looking in and saying, well, only that small number of people, which is only ever going to be that small number of people, might be interested in these bikes. But the next generations who are coming up to that age group, who could afford these big, expensive bikes, they're coming with this alternative mindset to say, actually, motorcycles are not the be-all and end-all. Cars are not the be-all and end-all. There are other things that we're interested in. There are other things we want to do things. Socially, we want to do other things as well. So Harley Davidson, that's why I don't really talk about them in terms of promoting them or, giving them free publicity or, if they got something good, I'll say they're doing something good. If they got something I'm not too keen of, I'll say that as well. But at the same time, I look at the likes of BSA, of Hero, of the Chinese brands, of Triumph, who brought out those 400s, of BMW, who brought out a couple of smaller bikes. And I say, do you know what? Hey, those are the ones that you really need to talk about, because those are the ones that are giving you great value for money. And if it puts, a person on two wheels on the road. Also, the motorcycle shows last November, and they had the Vogue 800. Mid-size ADV bike for about £7,000 or £8,000, dollars, shekels, whatever it is, had everything you'd ever want on a bike. If you like that sort of style, right? There are so many other bikes. There's so many people in that section area of all these sort of imported bikes, Chinese bikes, right? They were looking at them. We're all, hey, I'm sure people were having the similar kind of discussions, right? Or you could overhear people, because people say, hold on a minute, we all thought that biking was getting really, really expensive. But then you've got these brands here, and by the looks of it, these are great looking bikes, and they're really affordable. They're really affordable. So you think, well, yeah, maybe that's the stuff that we should be promoting, not the other stuff. That's the stuff that should be getting the juices flowing in terms of getting people into biking. And it comes all the way down the CCs. The cheap bikes for a couple of thousand, 2,000 or 3,000, you get a 200 or 300 cc bike. That's new. That's great, and it will do everything that you want it to do. But the problem is, people will always look at the likes of BMW, and Honda and Triumph and Harley Davidson and Indian and say, oh, they make those big bikes. Ducati, they make these big expensive bikes. They say, yeah, but they can, if they want to, make the inexpensive bike, the cheap bikes. This is why I always praise a company like Honda, because Honda motorcycles do exactly that. They've got the big expensive bikes, but they've got bikes all throughout the range, all the way up through the different sizes, different price ranges, and it's great. It depends, and you get people on two wheels, you get people riding bikes, you get people doing stuff out and about, and that's what you want. But just believing that people are going to continue riding bikes infinitum without any kind of encouragement, I think is a very dangerous game, because attitudes are changing, generations are changing, people are changing. The cost, it will be prohibitive for a lot of people. I've already seen it in the way I address things, the way I do things. All the projects that I thought I had planned for over the last sort of 3 or 4 years ago, I had lots of plans, lots of big plans. I said, yeah, I was going to do this, I was going to do that, I was going to invest the money, the pennies that I make off YouTube, I was going to do this, and then I thought, you know what? It's just too expensive. I'm just throwing my money away. And in fact, the money that you would earn from anything outside, let's say in YouTube, doesn't even pay for that. So then I'm going to have to pay even more just to do something, just to keep this thing alive. And it just, as I say, it's about prioritizing. It's about thinking, like, I really wanted a new bike. I wanted to look at changing my Harley Davidson and maybe get another one, maybe get an Indian. But I was looking at lots of other brands. I was looking at BMW 1250 RT, which I really like. I know they got the 1300. I'm not so keen on that. And I was thinking, God, and I went to have a look at a few, and I thought, I can't justify it. I can't justify buying that, but, I was looking at, ones about 2018, 2019, 2020, 2020s. I think I could pick one up for about, probably now about 6,000-7,000. So almost that'd be a like-for-like swap right now with what I've got on my bike, right, in terms of value. But going anything more than that, or putting extra money to it, and you kind of think, oh, that's a lot of money. I take your point here. I take your point that you're really interested in the brand new Harley Davidson Road Glide CVO Limited and everything like that. Look, if you love that bike, that's great, fantastic. And you should get excited by these bikes if this is what you want. But these are a lot of money for a lot of people. And a lot of people just can't afford to do it. And and for me, that is not promoting motorcycling. That is promoting motorcycling to only people with deep pockets. Now you might say, well, so what? This is what I wanted. This is what I wanted. This is, I want to buy a big expensive car or a big expensive bike. So what that other people can't afford it? I get it. I get it. That's absolutely right. That's your choice, and nobody should tell you what you should do or what you should want. But at the same time, if you're asking me what get my juices flowing in terms of what I want to see, and this is why I've been banging on the door, banging on the drum for the likes of Harley Davidson, for the likes of Indian, for the likes of, even the likes of Ducati and Triumph, considering that they bought their 400, but BMW, even all the big brands, to say, why don't you guys do something like Honda have done in terms of produce small CC, really cheap bikes? How come you've not do that? And the argument is, well, the market's saturated with those small bikes. But it doesn't stop the likes of Honda and many other manufacturers producing small bikes, does it? So, what's to stop you doing it? Triumph showed that it can be done with their 400s, right? And they're not even the cheapest. They're not even the cheapest. That's the thing. They're not even the cheapest. There we go. Anyway, listen, all I can say is I hope that the industry can respond further, can produce a lot more bikes with greater value. Yes, you still want to have those signature bikes, those high-value bikes, the Harley Davidsons, the Hondas, the BMWs, whatever, those 20,000, 30,000 pound bikes. But you've got to have something else as well. Otherwise, as always been my argument or advice to people was always this. Well, just because you don't want to buy a brand new Harley Davidson Indian, for 25, 30, 40,000 pounds, dollars, shekels, then just go and buy a used one, right? Just go and buy a used bike. You'll save yourself, half the money on a used bike, and you'll have a great bike. So just go and buy a used one, right? That's all you need to do. The problem is, in terms of the future of motorcycling, the motorcycle industry, that can't happen. You've got to have people, numbers of people, quite substantial numbers of people wanting to buy brand new motorcycles, and they've got to be able to afford it. So, one goes hand in hand in terms of the affordability, the desire, the supply, and the fashions to want to ride in the first place. Otherwise, you will continue to see more and more people drift away from motorcycling. Guess what? Or, it's not even just about drifting about motorcycling. They just might not ride their bikes hardly ever. So it's almost like they've got a bike, but they just don't ride it, for lots of different reasons. So they are technically a biker. And we know so many people, so many places, so many organizations that have people who are bikers, but they don't actually ride bikes. You have people who are bikers that don't even own motorcycles, right? So that doesn't mean that they're in their mind they're not a biker. They just aren't riding, let alone buying new bikes. They might just only ever be able to afford used bikes. And most people are like that, right? Until you get to a certain age where you think, well, yeah, maybe I get a new bike. And then you look at finance deals and you think, what's the cost of this? And then you're back onto that same old thing. Can I afford it? Where can I put this money? Do I really need to spend that money on that? But, it's lots of different things. The great thing about the motorcycle community lifestyle, bike lifestyle, I think will not go away. That is there. But I think what we're going to see more and more is that you're going to see more and more of people, being like wombles, really, making good use of the things that they find, taking old bikes or taking bikes and just working on them, making them really cool bikes, and having that community come back as well. The new bike community. I've got a feeling that spending big mega money on bikes, I think that's going to die down. But what will surge in the next few years is that. And also people just getting into cheap bikes and just valuing the fun. I've talked about this in the past as well. Not being miserable on big expensive bikes, but just having fun and smiling faces on really cheap, inexpensive bikes. And I think that's something that you cannot ignore. That's something you have to value. You have to embrace it. Because guess what? When you want to be on a bike, you want to enjoy it. It's got to be fun. It's not all about speed. It's not all about looking cool or looking mean. It's just about that feeling of fun and going out and having a great time. And I tell you what, if I have to leave you with that, that's my advice on it. But if you're going to get onto biking, just enjoy it. Enjoy it if you're riding around with a big smile on your face, you're halfway there. And that kind of feeling you never want to stop having. And if that's what it is, and that's what keeps the motorcycle community lifestyle going, then that's what it should be. I'm not sure the motorcycle industry at the higher end, at the expensive end, has got any future. I think the only future it's got is at the mid-level or cheaper end. Or certainly for the next 10 years anyway. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you like what I do here, keep on watching. Thanks for the comments in the chat. Really appreciate those. Let us know in the comments below as well. I'll be doing a live show again soon. Watch out for that. More impromptu live shows. And if you see them, just watch them afterwards as well. But appreciate all your support. Share the video, share the links, and hopefully I'll do a lot more live shows for you in the future. Right, with that, keep on biking. Catch you again. Bye now.